Okay, welcome. So we're going to do a quick tutorial about a concept in After Effects called continuously rasterize. And it comes up a lot when you are importing vector artwork into your After Effects files, and you end up getting some of these, what we might call the Jaggies or rasterization, and it looks really bad. So first, let me show you what I'm talking about. Here we are in After Effects, and I've zoomed up this element and made it quite big. And so you can see that there are all these jagged edges, right? This rasterization that does not look good, right? It sort of looks pixelated on the edge. And if I take it back to its regular 100% size, it's really tiny and it looks good there. But then if I zoom it up, that's when I get that horrible looking jagged edge. And especially if you have a really small vector object and you zoom that really, really high up, you're going to get those jaggies. So how do we fix that? Well, first let's talk about what we did when we brought in the actual file itself. So here I am in Adobe Illustrator, and I'm going to turn on the rulers here. And so you can see I've got this eyeball here, and it's 1000 by 1000 pixels. And then I've got all the different vector art elements in the different layers here, okay? And then when I went back to After Effects, I imported them into my project. And if I go to the main import, I'm going to go to the original version, the original import here. It looks pretty good, right? Everything looks sharp because it is at its own resolution that it came in at. So if I put the rulers here, you can see that this came in at 1000 by 1000. But generally, when you're creating an After Effects file, you're pulling one composition into a different composition. And in this case, I have my main composition. Just incidentally, I always name my files main, right? My main composition, I name it main. And so here we have a version of this imported file into the main, but there's a difference between the resolution. So if I go back to 100% for that imported file, you can see it's really small. And so that's 1000 by 1000, but my main composition, my full animation size, is 6000 by 6000. Now, honestly, that's probably too big. You don't generally do a file that has that high resolution, but this just illustrates that as I increase the scale, I get that rasterization, right? That I get that pixelization on the edges and the jaggies on the edges that I don't want. Okay, so how do we fix this? Well, first let's go back to the main object that we've created here. And if I show you kind of what's going on here, we've got a little animation, and the eyeball blinks, and then the eyes kind of move left and right. And in order to do that, I kind of had to do some pre-compositions. I had to take some of the elements and put them in their own composition. And so you're going to see that that's going to create even more of a little bit of a problem here. But the main thing that we got to think about here is that if we want to avoid that pixelization, we need to click on this tiny little button over here. It's really, really, really hard to see. It is, if I show all of my panels here, got to make sure I'm showing all the panels on the bottom left. I can see this tiny little dot here that has kind of like a star pattern. That is continuously rasterized. And what that's telling After Effects is that it wants, that you're telling it that you want it to rasterize that vector graphic. And then if we go back to main, you'll see that, okay, so part of it might be working. Another detail of this is that whenever you do continuously rasterize, you always need to do it everywhere. So this gets tricky, but you'll notice we did it in the original composition, but now we have to go to the main composition and do it again. So I have to click on that little element. And it's kind of hard to see, but if you look at the edges of the blue eyelid and the edges of the eyeball itself, you see how it got sharp? Okay, maybe we can zoom in here a little bit also. And you see how that got sharp? Now I will turn off continuously rasterize, and you see how it gets blurry? Okay, blurry, sharp. But you're probably thinking, well, why didn't the whole thing get rasterized? And yes, you're right. That's insane. It's maddening. It drives me crazy. But again, it's about making sure that everything you've done is highlighted with the continuously rasterize button. And so you remember how I said that I had most of the elements here are the original vector. You can see the little AE files. But there is one thing, the pupil and the iris, where I pre-composed those together and made them their own composition. And so they are a composition embedded in this composition. So that means I need to go into that composition and make sure that all of those sublayers are also continuously rasterized. And there's multiple ways to do it, but if I just double click on this composition, okay, now I am in that sub composition, right? That has the pupil, the iris, and the highlight. And again, here again, I have to click the continuously rasterize button. So again, I'm clicking it for all of these interior layers. And then if I go back up one level, okay, now those are continuously rasterized. I make sure that everything in this composition is continuously rasterized. And now when I go back to main, finally, everything is sharp. Okay. So it is quite tricky, and it's especially tricky when you have multiple layers or multiple compositions that need to be rasterized, right? It might be easy to do it on one vector layer, but once you start getting with kind of more complicated, and then you have compositions within compositions within compositions, you have to go back through and make sure that everything is continuously rasterized. Okay, I hope that makes sense, and thanks for listening.